right, welcome back to another episode of 6th grade math. So today we are going to be starting something which you have probably already heard of in the past, which is PEMDAS, but you will never hear me say that word again. We are going to be calling this order of operations. So the reason I don't like PEMDAS is because it gets you stuck on a certain way of thinking. We are going to call this order of operations, or OO for order of operations. So OO is how we're going to think of this, order of operations. So order of operations tells us how we are going to solve a math problem, because if we don't have a certain order, people can solve the same math problem and get different answers, which is not okay. We all have to be able to get the same answer. So that's what order of operations does for us. So we are also not going to use PEMDAS. We are going to use GEMDAS, okay? So G instead of a P. And G stands for groups. And there are different ways that you can see groups. You can see it with parentheses, which is the normal way. That's where PEMDAS comes from. So groups. But you can also see what are called brackets that look something like this. You might have seen those on your keyboard. Or you can even see something that looks like this. So all of these are different types of groupings. But what I need you to realize is there has to be something inside that grouping. So this is not like when we see 9 parentheses 2, because we've talked about that. That's multiplication. What I mean by groupings is there has to be something happening inside the parentheses. So notice this parentheses has a plus sign inside. So this would be what we would solve first. Okay? So after groupings, we are going to move down, and then we would do exponents. Now we haven't really talked about exponents yet. So that's the number that's at the top, and we are just going to kind of skip over that for right now. We will learn exponents in a little bit. So after that, we go on to multiply or divide, or we could do divide or multiply. So this is the part where my 6th graders really struggle. You do not always multiply first. In this section, you have to read left to right like in a sentence, okay? So when we are reading a sentence, we go this direction. So if you have a problem that has multiplication, then division, you would solve it in that order. Or if you have division and then multiplication, you would solve it in that order. You do what comes first, okay? So that's what gets a little tricky there. And then after we multiply or divide, we can move on to adding and subtracting. And then we could even, kind of like in the one above, we could go into subtract or add. So again, we read it like a sentence. So whatever comes first, if you have adding and then subtracting, you would add and then subtract. Or if you had subtract and then add, you do what comes first. So those are the tricky ones. So it's always groupings, exponents, multiply or divide, add or subtract in that order. So this is our OO tower, and that's what we are going to practice. Last thing, we check all parentheses before starting and rewrite. Because sometimes, like I said, if it's like 9 parentheses 2, we would rewrite that as 9 times 2. But if it was 9 plus 2 inside the parentheses, we could leave it like that. So we really need to pay attention to those. And then we are only doing these first 2 problems today. And then we will do the rest of our notes at a later date. So here we go. We have 6 parentheses 11 minus 5 times 9. So I need to check those parentheses. Right here. Is there anything happening inside the parentheses? No. This is a multiplication parentheses. So I am going to rewrite this as 6 times 11 minus 5 times 9. So that right there is what I'm going to focus on. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to write my OO tower, and it is going to have 4 pieces. So cut it in half and then cut it in half again. So the top 2 never change. We are going to have our groups and our exponents, okay? Then I have to make decisions here, okay? Let's go back to the front. So when I am multiplying or dividing, this is where I'm talking about right here, okay? We have learned recently that when we have negatives and we are multiplying or dividing, we have to use integer man. So we need to get used to drawing him right there. And then if you were adding and subtracting with negatives, we should use integer table. So we are also going to draw him right there. So let's go ahead and do that. I have integer man and table, and that's just to help us remember what goes there, okay? So I am going to read this like a sentence, and I am looking for multiplying or dividing. So reading right here, what's happening? Multiplication. So I am going to put an M here for multiply. Do I have any more multiplication or division? Yes, I do. I have multiplication here. So I am going to put another M because I have 2 pieces of multiplication. I do not have any division, so I'm not going to put a D. 2M stands for 2 multiplications. So now I can fill in this piece, which is my adding or subtracting. And I don't have any adding, all I have is subtracting here, so I am just going to put 1S, and that is it. That is my OO tower. Again, I have multiplying, subtracting. And then we can solve. So the way we are going to solve is we are always going to start with our groups. Do I have any groups? No, I don't. I don't have parentheses, brackets, nothing like that. So I'm going to mark that out. We don't have exponents. We haven't learned that yet. So I am on my first multiply. And again, I read it like I read a sentence. So I'm going to start at the front. 6 times 11. There's no negatives, just regular old multiplication. So 66. Notice I put a box around what I'm solving. Now I'm going to mark out what I just solved and rewrite everything that is left outside goes here. So now that I have done that first multiplication, I can get rid of it and move on to my second multiplication. Notice I did not go to the subtracting yet. I am still on this row right here. We work our way down. So I am not on subtract yet. I am still on multiply. So now, I know it's weird, but I'm going to go to the back and finish that multiplication. Notice I did not put the minus sign with the 5. This is 5 times 9, which is 45. Mark it out. And this time I have stuff in front, so I am going to write it just like it says and put it back in front, okay? Because order matters, we can't change the order here. So now I am done with that multiplying. All that is left is my subtraction, which is indeed right here. And I can't do that subtraction in my head, so I'm going to stack it up. Gives me 1, 2. So my final answer is 21. And that is how we use our order of operations. All right, let's do our next one. So looking, I have lots of different operations, okay? But there are no parentheses, so I am good to just go ahead and draw my OO tower. Remember, we draw it. We're going to cut it in half and then cut those 2 pieces in half. And then my GE never change. And then I am looking for multiplying or dividing first. Don't forget your integer man and your table. So, do I have multiplying or dividing? First off, I see dividing. So this time I am going to write a D for division because right here I have division first. Do I have any other multiplying or dividing? Yes, I do back here. So I am going to write an M for multiplying. So again, I really need you to focus here. Division came first, so I'm going to divide first. Multiplication came second, I'm going to multiply. I have not messed with the adding and subtracting yet. That's down here. We are just doing multiply and divide up here. Now I can move on to the bottom row. Do I have adding or subtracting? Yes, adding came first. So A for adding, and then subtracting came second. So S for subtracting. So adding, subtracting. And now we can use our OO tower and actually start solving, okay? So no groupings, no exponents. My first step is divide. So I'm going to put a box. And this is pretty simple. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then I'm going to rewrite everything that was left. So plus 55 minus 7 times 3. Next step, I'm done with dividing. So in my OO tower, I have multiply next. Notice I'm not adding and subtracting yet. 7 times 3 is 21. Mark it out and keep this in the same order. I'm rewriting in front. Okay, next step. I am done with multiplying. Now the next thing in my OO tower is adding. So I'm going to add 55 plus 5. That's another easy one. That is 60. What's left is minus 21. And then our last step is subtracting. And again, I cannot do that in my head. So I'm going to borrow. That gives me 9. 3. So my final answer is 39. So big things, draw your OO tower, and then make sure you are filling it in and go